ADVOC again. Love it. Okay. So if you're just joining us and you're wondering what everyone is doing, we are doing a little intro activity where we introduce ourselves and our name, pronoun, organization, if you have one, and then a leader who you think really inspires you through the power of story. And you can do that. You can share that all on our Google Sheet so we can all easily see what everyone is sharing, and that link is available. Okay, if you're still doing that, great. But we are going to get started. Ready, Vicki?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, first off, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I had not imagined we'd have 91 people doing this session. I feel like people talk about the power of stories so much, so I didn't know if this was going to be something that people are like, oh, been there, done that. But that's kind of the problem a little bit. I feel like things have gotten a little stale, a little rote. So we're going to introduce ourselves first and then talk a little bit about what our approach to storytelling is with some refreshers, some context, and some useful tips and strategies for you. So let's start with ourselves. My name is Arshad. Vicki's joining me over here. Some of you know me, but most of you do not. I started in politics, well, I guess since I was a little wee baby organizer, but I became an executive director at a national organization, Democracy for America, really young. I hadn't quite turned 27 yet. And, I like to think, oh, because I did really great program work, I have good ideas, I was a good fundraiser, so sure, I should be a great executive director. The issue, though, the problem that I came up with is that I felt that people just weren't taking me seriously. Maybe it was my age, maybe it's because I'm a person of color, but over and over, candidates would complain and say, oh, I'm going to go talk to your boss about this. Or donors would complain. Or one time I had a presidential candidate who was seeking our endorsement. Backstage at a private event, I walked up to him and he turned around and gave me his trash to throw away. He didn't know who I was. But what I realized at that moment was I didn't have the presence of a leader. And sure, the world is screwed up and a lot of people don't want to see me as a leader, but all the more important that I take up space and that I have a compelling story to tell people right off the bat. Since then, I was an executive director at DFA and at Progress Now. I've led major progressive organizations, but the one skill that I thought was super important for me in order to be seen as a leader, in order to move people to action, is having a presence. And you can do that by having a powerful public story. So that's why I'm at Convey now. I'm done leading organizations, and now I work with other rising leaders on their story and how they convey it out into the public. Vicki?
Hi, everybody. I'm Vicki Rausch, Arshad's partner in Convey Communications. And I was that kid. I was that kid singing, dancing, performing. I was always downstage when the curtain closed. Everybody else was through, but not me. I had to keep going. Nothing gave me more pure joy than to be singing and acting and performing in general. It's in my DNA. And I studied for years and years and years and years. And I love it so much. And I learned so much. And I just find it so useful in everything I do to this day. Every single thing, in all the jobs I've had, relationships. It's been great. It's been such an asset to me. But something I find so dispiriting is when I see these great progressive elected officials and movement leaders who have such wonderful stories, and they're so smart and they have all the truth and all the facts, but they don't connect it to themselves, to the person. We like people who are friendly. We like people that we can connect to. And if someone's just reading us a list of things, that's not the person. The person isn't a list. The person is a great personality and someone who really is a friend to all of us. So I am here to help people use their presence, learn the skills, learn the techniques, so that we can all be more effective as that theater kid all grown up. And I do want to take a moment to dedicate this training today to our mentor, the late Joel Silverman, who is the one and only reason I am here today. His guidance and his leadership and his trainings were so inspirational. So here's to you, Joel.
Yours too, Joel. We miss you. One other person I'd love to introduce, or actually, you can see Linda throwing up the links. She's our helper today, so if you have any questions, she's probably going to be the one to answer it if it's about, she's going to be the one to queue it up so that we can answer it. I'm sorry. If you have any questions, we will be answering them. The way that we're going to answer them for this training is about halfway through, we'll pause, take any collected questions so far, answer them, or maybe save them for our second Q&A period, which would be at the end of this training. We'll also give you our contact information at the end so that if you have any questions that we weren't able to answer or you think of them later, please feel free to use us as a resource. This is a big, huge, rich topic, and it's also enormously important because it is so powerful. So thank you for joining us. Let's get started. So here is the reason that we decided to do this training. And there's another training that we also love that is happening right this conference around storytelling. It's not just that it is extremely important, that it's powerful, it's moving, but it's that it's being done wrong now by us over and over. I think what's happened is we become too rote about the way that we tell our stories, or it's a bit mechanical, or it's a bit formulaic, and it's not even a good formula, but it's not the way the best stories are told. And so we wanted to go over this training to, one, return us back to why it is important, but also how we do it. So we're gonna cover 3 topics. First, we're gonna talk about the history, sociology, and literally even the biology of storytelling, how it literally affects our brains and bodies. All to get at why it's so important that we do it, which will also get at what are the essential components. That's the next thing. The key components that make storytelling work. We're missing out on pieces of them, and that's why it's not resonating so much. So we're gonna talk about those key components. And then finally, we'll talk about what we ourselves, us as humans, do to be compelling when we're telling the story. A little bit more about the how, not just the pieces, but the person behind the storytelling. So those are the 3 things, and we'll get started.
Oh, here we go.
So I first wanted to start and put this in a historical context. The history of humanity isn't just history as a story itself. Story plays a role. Every major advancement in humanity isn't just simply an advancement in humanity. It's an advancement in the way that we relate to each other through story. The beginning of civilization was our first storytelling, cave art. The beginning of language was through cave art. The beginning of civilization was through story. Our first story, Gilgamesh, is still told today. Through millennia and millennia, we have preserved the first known story. The advent of the printing press democratized the ability to tell story through the masses. And today, we have all kinds of new technology, which sometimes itself becomes the story, but really between all of the ways that we disseminate our story and our values online, whether it's TED Talks or social media, that is itself power right now. So storytelling has always played a role in history. It is history. That's how we learn from each other. When you put your child to sleep at night, I don't have a child, so every time I do that, I'm like, I don't know what to do. When you put your child to sleep at night, you don't read them spreadsheets, you read them stories, because they endure in our psyche and our imagination. It is how we know where we are, who we are. So they endure. Stories are also how we derive and transmit values and identity. So again, with the history of civilization, mythologies sort of tell us not just a fun sort of, oh, this person did that and this person did this. It's also a way that we transmit our morality. All of the major religions that are written in the world are often a collection of stories. Again, to tell you what right and wrong, but they do that through stories. The Bible, the Quran, these aren't simply like a set of commandments, although there are commandments. They're all born out through those stories, why we do it, how we do it, and the various actors. We talk about those actors today, real or fictionalized or however it is. Fables that we read kids. One of the most important ways that we derive identity is through our own family stories. Now, these family stories aren't necessarily all true or real, but they give us identity. So you might believe that you descend from certain people or certain parts of the world. You might believe that you're related to royalty or criminals that are famous. But these are stories that even today we tell, and they have enormous political import. Where was Barack Obama born? Why was Elizabeth Warren told that she was Native American? Why did you tell others? All of this stuff is something that we still talk about now. And today, as we've nominated, yesterday, as we've nominated Kamala Harris, we are learning about what? Her story through her family.
There we go.
Yeah. So we transmit morality, we derive identity through stories. If we're not telling stories, if we're not telling them the right way, then we're ceding this ground for others to define ourselves and to claim the moral high ground. And that's a lot of what has been happening over the last, I would say, 2 decades or so of politics. So we've got an example for you.
Yeah, give me a second here to switch shares.
Sure. So,
and oh my dear, what's going on there? I found this video of Jamie Harrison, and I absolutely fell in love with it as really a masterclass in storytelling. It's so compelling. It's so compelling that in a minute, it kind of got me weepy. It's very powerful, and see if you can discern in this video what's working for him and what's making this a great story.
In South Carolina, our motto is
we can't see the video, Vicki.
Are we having it?
I hope.
No, we just need you to share your screen.
Are we having it? Please hold. I am finding my...
And for our
take it away.
For our viewers at home, so that you know, Jamie Harrison is running for Senate in South Carolina, and he's doing really well against an established incumbent, Lindsey Graham. So here it is.
Let's try it again. Thanks everybody for your patience.
In South Carolina, our motto is while I breathe, I hope. I'm gonna tell my story of hope. There was one night I was in the United States Capitol. It was late, it was about midnight. So late that the custodial staff has started to come to clean up. So I'm sitting there at my computer doing my work for Jim Clyburn, and there was this middle-aged African-American woman, and she came in and she said, you know, are you from South Carolina? And I said, yes, ma'am, I am. She said, are you from Orangeburg? I said, yes, ma'am, I'm from Orangeburg. Then she goes over to my pictures on the wall. She says, is that your mother? And I said, yes, ma'am. Is your mother's name Patricia Harrison? Yes, ma'am. And she started to shake and she put her hand up to her mouth and she said, oh my God, I know your mother. I went to high school with your mother. I remember when your mom dropped out of school to have you. And tears start flowing from her face and tears were flowing from mine, and she hugged me. She said, I would have never thought that Patricia Harrison's son would be right here. You give me hope. My life is emblematic that the American dream works.
It's great.
Well, how about that, huh?
We got identity for sure, because we learned about his family, but we also got an idea of his values. He did that without telling us a laundry list of issues he supports. Although, yeah, of course that's important. But we got to hear about where he derives his value from, his family. We got to hear about his identity. We got to hear about his case for hope, which, gosh, we really need right now. He did all of that in 81 seconds.
He sure did. Masterfully. I can watch it over and over again and learn more things about storytelling.
And we have. One more key piece of context for why storytelling is important, and this is critical for why we have to get it right, is that storytelling is biologically hardwired into us. So let me give you an example. Here is, an image of a brain. When you are hearing facts, issues, laundry lists, here is what is being triggered. You've got language comprehension and language processing. It's when you learn your facts. Now, take a look if you have the same information being told via story. You are engaging so much more of your audience's brain. You're engaging the visual cortex, you're engaging all of the senses. Moreover, you're also engaging emotional sensations for people. When you're doing this, you're making so many different crossing connections within the brain, it makes it easier to remember. But it isn't just easier to remember. It's not just that you get to stick in somebody's brain, but you also affect them in their perception of you and what they're asking, and how they'll respond when you ask them for something. And that's why this is so important, storytelling, for persuasion, because we have evolved biologically to be moved by stories, not simple asks and not simple facts. Take a look at the next slide here. These are these two chemicals that are released in your brain, literally, dopamine and oxytocin. You may be familiar with them. Dopamine is what makes us feel good, and oxytocin is the relational hormone or a relational brain chemical. It makes us trust each other and feel close to one another. When you're telling stories versus when you're telling facts, these brain chemicals get released, and this has been measured in the bloodstream. When that happens, you are more likely, your audience is more likely to not only listen to you, but remember you, but also be persuaded by you. If there's a call to action in your story, then they're more likely to say yes. And this has been tested over and over with fundraising appeals. It's been tested on simple actions that you can do. The action with the facts versus the action with the story, you'll get an enormous increase in the rate of people actually doing the thing, and including even the amount of money that people give or the depth of the action that you can ask them to do. There's a biological basis for taking action and being persuaded after hearing a story.
Oh, there we go. I'm answering a question right now for Brittany. And she asked me to share a link of that video. I have it downloaded on my computer. So if you don't mind, just go Google Jamie Harrison, While I Breathe, and it'll take you right to it. And it's very powerful. Thank you for asking that question.
Great. And so that you know, you can ask a question at any time. We've just dedicated certain times of the presentation to answer the questions, so we can stay pretty organized and keep it moving. So let's keep it moving and move on to the next piece. Let's do. I want to pause real quick with a quick distinction. I make a distinction between anecdote and story. An anecdote can be any telling of events. You did a thing. Here's what I ate for breakfast. Or even just who I am. But a story is something more. It's something richer. A story has a set of key components and elements we'll go over in just a second that does all of those things that trigger all of those reactions in our minds. And those are the things that stay with us. I don't remember what somebody had for breakfast the other day. I don't remember what I had for breakfast the other day. But I do remember what the stories I've heard and how I see and define people, right? I remember all the way back in the debates about Kamala Harris saying, and that little girl was me, right? I don't actually remember what issues she talked about aside from the ones related to that one. I don't remember what issues Biden talked about aside from like the stories that we heard, maybe about his son. So the stories, the challenges that we see, those are real stories. Anecdotes are often what I'm hearing these days. And there's always a place for anecdotes for sure, but I distinguish them, and you'll see how I distinguish them because they have a structure and key components. So let's go over that real quick. Story, this is the structure. You probably heard of the term narrative arc, and I'm just gonna go over this really quickly because it is actually intuitive. So in a narrative arc, you start with the exposition. It's basically the scene setting. You get introduced to people, and maybe there's a little bit of foreshadowing, a little bit of tension, but we're just sort of seeing the world kind of as it is presented. You often get a character introduced, but then when the action starts moving, it's usually because there's something that storytellers like to call an inciting incident. Something has happened. There's an intervention that has changed the course of the protagonist's life. Things are now not going to be the same again. So this is an important moment in any story. And that's when things start really happening. It's called rising action, but that's like when the pace kind of picks up, right? You'll have a number of crises, challenges, choices have to be made. And eventually there's that final crisis, that final choice that's made. That's the climax. And results, good or bad, we've learned something from it, at least for the stories that we are going to be telling as advocates, organizers, and political operatives. So let's break down some key pieces here. There's 5 components to a story. There's the protagonist, the hero. I often also like to add a villain. I think that's often important. But right now, we're just going to talk about making sure there's a hero, the setting, the challenge, the choice, the outcome, and the moral. All of these components are really critical. And when you don't have one, you don't have a story. First, let's start with the hero. A hero, in every case, has to be a person. It's not a concept. It's not an institution. It's not a law. It is a person. Start small and then go big. It is a person. And the important thing here, and the way that you're going to be able to relate as an organizer or a politico, is that this person has aspirations. Those aspirations will connect your hero with your audience, because we too have aspirations. And this is the important thing, and this is one of the things that is wrong with storytelling that I see predominantly on the progressive side. I'll give you an example. When we talk about kids in cages, we focus a story on those kids in cages. And sure, they had aspirations, but they weren't the same. They weren't relatable, because honestly, those Americans who never could imagine themselves in that situation can't imagine their kids in cages. But do you know what they have? That the parents also, that the kids also have? Parents with aspirations. You would do anything for your children. You would cross rivers, you would climb mountains, you would make sure your kids get the best school, make sure they're fed every day, make sure they have medicine, and you will do whatever it takes to make that happen. That makes you the hero in the story. And that makes you share the aspirations with the people who cross that border for a better life for those kids. So a hero needs to have aspirations in order to connect with the audience. And those aspirations are going to be important. They're going to come up in a second again. So what's the next piece? The setting, the scene, setting the scene. So remember that sort of image with the brain. The reason we're being vivid is we want to engage those senses. The reason we need to engage those senses is because we want to get all those parts of the brain firing up. And not just, oh, it looks like this or it sounds like that. Get everything going. Our memories are connected to scent, for example, and those memories are connected to emotions. Those emotions make us connect, feel, empathize with the person in those stories. So let's use all those senses. This is also your opportunity to start foreshadowing, start putting in a little tension. And for us as organizers, there's a specific tension that we want to hit on. If we want to change the world, there's a specific tension. So let's talk about that in a second too. So this is the point, another point that really distinguishes between anecdotes and stories, is that there has to be a challenge. You come up against something. That's usually that inciting moment, that inciting incident. And that challenge sows doubt in the hero. That doubt is important because that also gets your protagonist to relate to the person in the audience, because we all have doubts. You know, Superman isn't interesting without a weakness, right? And Batman isn't interesting without, and for his weaknesses is, you know, he sometimes has this deep doubt, right? For all of their powers and their resources, they still have doubt. And that's what makes them, despite being completely unrelatable in terms of their power or money, still the hero. The tension that I want you to bring up, it was where the challenge comes in, is as progressives, when we're trying to persuade, when we're trying to change the world, is that in one way or another, we are sort of diving into the tension as the world as it ought to be versus the world as it is. We are living in the world as it is, and there's something wrong with it. And you can start foreshadowing that right in the very beginning. Something wrong is about to happen. Everything is good, but maybe not. And that's when the hero comes up against the challenge, the doubt, the tension. Here's another key thing for organizers. If you tell a story and it's simply about how the world is coming down on the hero, and then everything just gets better, you haven't actually mobilized anyone to action. Because in order for people to take action, they have to believe that they have a choice, right? Like you might hear this talked elsewhere. You'll probably hear it all the time at this conference about the theory of change. In any theory of change, there has to be some reasonable expectation that the people who you're asking to take the action can have some meaningful impact on the outcome, right? To be able to change the world. So in your stories, it's the same thing. The hero has to have agency. And that choice, this is where we get back to aspirations, that choice is motivated by that hero's aspiration. That person has crossed a river because they want the best. And so that's not an easy choice to make. And they will do whatever they need to abide by any challenge so that they can live a better life. And that's something that we can all do. Live a better life. We'll make that choice too. So at the end of the day, there's an outcome and a moral. And this isn't just about having a happy ending. In our work, there isn't always happy endings. And that's okay. I mean, I prefer one, but that's okay, because the point here, the end of any story, is that there's a moral. It's not just what happened. It's what do we learn along the way. And for us, as we're organizing and as we're persuading, it often means that the hard thing, the difficult thing, is the right thing to do. And that not always will that change the world, not instantaneously, but over time, that moral arc of the universe, it'll bend towards justice. That's the whole point of making these difficult decisions and challenging situations.
All right. Please hold while I switch the sharing. Hopefully a little more efficiently this time.
For a piece of context, this is a story I told at Netroots. Oh gosh, maybe a decade ago. It was actually a storytelling challenge called Ignite. You have 20 slides. You have to tell them all in 5 minutes and 15-second increments. So it's a little crazy, but it's fun. Take a look.
Yep, here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Arshad Hassan.
Thanks, Adam. My name's Arshad. I work for Democracy for America, DFA. It's a pretty great group. It's progressive. It's political. I'm the executive director. At least I will be until August when I step down. But it's been a great gig. And I know that a lot of you do really great work, but you didn't always. At some point, you learned about right and wrong. You learned about power, who has it, who doesn't. I mean, you're not Lady Gaga. You were not born this way. Somewhere along the way, you learned about you need to make the world a better place. So that means you all have an origin story. This is my origin story. I was born in Grand Forks, North Dakota. In the halls of this school, Red River High School, I learned about right and wrong. More importantly, I learned about power and powerlessness. Now, in high school, I was a huge nerd. I mean, I was a captain of the debate team. I started the chess club, president of the German club. I was mostly just concerned about great grades, and I just wanted to get into a really nice college. One thing I was not in high school was a jock. I particularly hated the hockey jocks. They were on top of the sort of the food chain in North Dakota. It's hockey, you know? They could do no wrong. They were dumb and they were popular, and I kind of just wanted to take them down a notch. So I started a paper, an underground paper, and it was crude, it was snarky. We made fun of those hockey jocks, the cheerleader chicks. I mean, it's a kind of humor you might expect from some 14-year-old boys. But it was popular. And we printed it year after year. And as we matured, so did our paper. We started adding poetry, artwork, satire. We started writing critiques and exposés. We criticized the administration, policies. We named names, and then we named ourselves. One day I wrote a critique of the principal. And I don't actually remember what it was, but I'm sure it was crude. The principal came in and with all of the other administrators marched into the commons when we were distributing our papers and seized our papers, every last copy. I protested quietly, politely in his office. I said, no, you see, I have the First Amendment right to speak freely. You've made an error. I'll show you you're wrong. And I thought, well, that'll fix it. Once I prove that he's wrong, that'll be fine. He says, no, Arshad, I don't think you understand. I'm the principal here and you don't have any First Amendment rights. Well, I came to him with research. I had years and years of case law and school policies, and I can show you you're wrong here, here, and here. We're settled. Don't you see? He said, no, Arshad, I don't think you see. I'm the principal. I make the rules. You'll be suspended. And I protested and he said, Arshad, I understand you're trying to get into some very nice colleges. Wouldn't it be a shame if you couldn't get any letters of recommendation from this school? My world was shattered. How could he do this to me? I didn't do anything wrong and I knew it. It didn't matter that I was right and he was wrong. It mattered that he was powerful and I was not. So I sat and I thought about it. What do I do next? And I figured if what really mattered was power, it didn't matter if you were right and wrong. What if I could switch the equation around? What if I could be powerful and righteous? Well, I didn't know really how to do that, so I started a petition. So this is the 90s, though. There was no Move On or DFA or Change.org. It was a paper petition. And I had to tell my story person to person, face to face. And as I did, more and more people signed it. We had over 500 signatures in the first day, including those hockey jocks and cheerleader chicks. The real newspaper actually started writing an article. Then Minnesota Public Radio did a little story. Then I wrote an op-ed. Then I started getting those people who were on those petitions to call in to the school and to the principal. Then TV cameras started rolling into my school, bright lights, lots of attention all over town. And then from the next town, 70 miles away, it was a media fiasco. We were creating a firestorm of embarrassment for the principal. So I gave him my paper back. I got my paper back, and I came back the next year with my paper. He didn't. He lost his job. Now, of course, the next year I had to start applying to colleges, and they asked me, all these questions, essay questions. They asked me name a time you took a risk, and was it worth it? And so I told them the story, and I couldn't finish the essay because I said, I don't actually know if it was worth it because my principal said by doing this, you wouldn't let me in. Well, I got it. The righteous are not always the powerful, and the powerful are not always so righteous. It's a tension. It's a difficult lesson to learn. But you and I and everyone here in this room, we've learned this lesson. And more than that, we've learned to fight back. And we know that we won't win every time. We know that we won't win actually many times. But we know that if we keep fighting for it, we can finally make the world as it ought to be, not the world as it is now. So thank you, everyone, for doing all of the work that you do.
Right on, man.
The only thing that's changed is I grew a beard. So we've got a little exercise for you because stories are open to interpretation. We wanted to ask you to break it down a little bit, and we'll actually give you another little worksheet activity thing, and we'll put that in the chat. So what I want to ask everyone to do, like kind of as a group, you can enter in your own responses, but talk about this one's kind of easy. Who is a hero? When you're talking about it's me. When you're talking about a hero, what does a hero have? He's a person, I am a person, with aspirations. And in this story, the aspiration changed, actually. So I'm going to ask you to go to this link and fill in who is a hero and what are their aspirations. I'm going to ask you, identify what was the challenge here. You might find a couple. What are the choices that were made, or what might not have happened? And what is the moral of this story? So there's no ask at the end of this story, which I want you to have asks at the end of your story, but there is a moral. So let's all head over to this Google document. So you can see it in the Zoom webinar chat here. Oh, come on. I missed it. And yeah, cool. So it's just any old answer sheet, but it's any old spreadsheet, but take a line and talk a little bit about it. So when you're entering in who is a hero, talk a little bit about aspirations. For the challenge, what was the choice? What are we to learn? So so go ahead and fill that out a little bit. And because I say it's open to interpretation, I really do feel like there doesn't necessarily have to be only one right answer. What could happen is that people identify with different things that are to them challenging, or different things that are to them the choice that they might relate to, that they need to make. And of course, people will draw different conclusions as to what the moral is. That's always going to happen. So I'm taking a look at some of these answers. So I'm going to read them out for you. So I see, what is the challenge here? One way to interpret it is threatening to lose my paper. Another way to talk about it was loss of speech, loss of rights in a social context. One person said a personal threat, and that is actually how I felt about it. I talk about it, after the fact about my rights, because that's what I usually talk about, the First Amendment when I'm telling the story. But for me personally, all I ever wanted to do was go to school, go to the best school. I mean, South Asian parents, it's all, it's important. So, so it's important. So what choice was made? Standing up. I actually have a longer version of the story. There's like 20 minutes where I agonize about the choice. But I easily could have just got my A's and got my letters of recommendation, but I didn't, right? So fight the principle, persist, that's another answer. Continue telling the truth, that's another answer for the choice being made. And I'll move on now to the moral of the story. I was kind of explicit about it in terms of how I see it, but it was for me, absolutely, standing up for your beliefs and what is right, absolutely, absolutely. Oh, I like this one answer here, and I want to talk about this too. So, so the challenge, I sometimes will say, who was the villain in this? Because I set you up for kind of like a diversion, right? I started the story talking about the hockey jocks, that they were the villains because of the popular kids. Because before I encountered my principal like this, I thought the power dynamic in the school was nerds versus jocks, to boil it down simply. But really, it ended up being students versus teachers, and it changes in the middle. Just like the aspiration for the hero in the story changes in the middle. And so it's part of there's a longer training where we talk about a journey and this kind of stuff. So cool. All right, great. This is super fun. We got like 30 different people answering. I love it. This is cool. All right, let's get back to this. So thank you very much. Let's get back to the webinar. All right.
Okay. Well, you guys keep doing that. I want to talk about my jam. How are we going to keep the audience interested, engaged, and convinced? We want our story to be told in the best way possible, the most convincing. Well, one of the ways is with your voice. So we'll spend the next 3 hours talking. No, I could. But for the next few moments, we're going to talk about coloring your words. You know, you can use the same words to convey many, 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 many different emotions and thoughts and feelings. For instance, oh, sure. Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Oh, sure. See? 2 simple words said a different way every time conveyed an extremely different emotion each and every time. So what I want to do is an exercise that we do in real life in front of real people when we can in the before times, but we're going to do it with you and just trust that you'll play along. Cookies and cream. We're going to say the word cookies and cream to convey an emotion. Right? So it's very innocuous. It really doesn't mean any kind of emotional thing by itself, but let's just try a little exercise. We're going to color our words. We're going to take out the highlighter. We're going to underline them. We're going to bold them. We're going to make them bigger or smaller, the long journey, right? The trip to the store was short and sweet. See how I color my words and I paste my words and I shape my words to match what it is I'm saying. That just emphasizes it even more, and it's another way that we can remember things. Okay, so let's try this little exercise together. Cookies and cream. I'm going to give you a sentence and you're going to finish it with the words cookies and cream, but say them in a way that conveys your true emotion. The first one should be extremely easy. Arshad, I'll bet you have a good example for that one.
Sure, and we do want everyone to do this at home.
Yes, please do it.
You gotta actually
I can't hear you.
Okay, so I'll go. Donald Trump makes me want to cookies and cream.
Yes, cookies and cream too. Is everybody trying it? I love cookies and cream too, and sometimes I use wine and cheese. So you can use whatever your words you want there, Kristen. Just so you're getting the idea, right? Okay, let's try the next one. The weather outside is cookies and cream.
I got the weather outside is Cookies and cream.
I like it. Okay, everybody, are you having success with this? Are you getting the gist of where I'm going? There we go.
I'm gonna do it.
That little puppy
That
is
cookies and cream. Cookies and cream. Cookies and cream. This is
my
called
little puppy is a little cookies and cream. Oh, well, now that you have stolen the scene.
Sorry.
Yeah, so guys, when you are telling a story, you've built your story, you followed all of the advice that Arshad has given you in constructing the story, really think about how those words are coming out of your mouth. If you're just reading a ticker tape, it's not going to have any meaning whatsoever, right? If you're just reading those words off the page, they're not going to have as much meaning. But when they are coming from your heart and you are helping them along with really planned out coloration of those words and usage, oh my God, you're going to be acting. It's going to have so much more emphasis and so much more meaning. And for God's sake, smile, because everybody likes a friendly person. We can't help it. Okay? Thank you guys so much. Really practice that little cookies and cream exercise when you're composing your stories.
I'd like to interject here real quick because we get this sometimes and it doesn't come out right away. So at Convey, our client base is actually women, people of color, and LGBTQ people almost exclusively, and that's on purpose. And one of the things that we find is that women, people of color, and LGBTQ people often in public, when they're being a leader, they'll actually start kind of burying their authentic personality. And they'll start, and they'll do that by doing the opposite of what Vicki just said. And I think it's because of this concept of professionalism. It's because how we've been policed all the time. We're telling you to do the opposite. We're telling you to do the cookies and cream. So particularly, like, don't be afraid of these emotions. And yes, it's particularly fraught because our expressions of emotions are policed all the time. There are ways to do it, and that's what we specialize in at Convey. But the way to not do it is to be stiff and emotionless. That's why we had to include this segment in our storytelling.
Yeah. Take up some space. Take up all the space when you're telling your story, because your story is important. You are a leader, you are an authority, you are an expert, and your story is important, and you deserve to be heard. So give it your very best shot.
Absolutely. I would love to see if there's any questions. So if you have questions from this presentation that you'd like to ask us right now and for the next 5 minutes, you can put them in the Q&A and we'll answer them. And yeah, we'd love to. We tried different ways to be interactive. So we hope that some of those worked for you. Maybe others will work for others. And we want to leave some time for the questions.
Also, we'd like to remind you that as a bonus for coming to our training today, and we're so glad that you did, I'm so happy, we are offering complimentary office hours, 20-minute sessions while they last. Linda's going to put up a link to that, to a Calendly app, and you can go and reserve some space. And then it's going to be Tuesday, I think. But after you sign up on the app, we will send you a Zoom link. So Brittany's got a great question for you there, Arshad. Do you have the Q&A box open?
Got it. How do you feel? Oh, this is a messaging question. How do you feel about telling stories while avoiding the opposition's points? Any tips? This is actually why storytelling is so important, because it allows you to frame and kind of forces everyone else to be on your playing ground. And often we are responding to a narrative structure that the opposition, the right, has already laid down. This is true when we talk about capitalism. This is true when we talk about white supremacy, et cetera. So the very first thing I would do is start, particularly if you can, if it's about you, start with your own personal perspective. It's unassailable. So tell your stories. The emotions that you have, the experiences that you have in your perspective are unassailable. I mean, it's not actually unassailable. Again, if you're a woman, a person of color, et cetera, we're being denied our own stories. But once you start on that point, even if every now and then something is colored by the world that we live in, I would start from your own personal story, because then you kind of force people onto your playing field. So get personal. That's my big tip there. Get personal. Next one, how long or short should your story be? This is dependent, I think, on the medium and the venue. Online, they have to be much shorter. So that 5-minute story that I told as an Ignite presentation, it's intentionally supposed to be 5 minutes. The slides auto advance every 15 seconds. That was defined for me. It had to be that long exactly. However, that's pretty long for an online format. Also, if you're on TV, on camera, we also do a lot of media training, you don't get not even a fraction of 5 minutes. So that in that case, when you're on video, when you're online, do the Jamie Harrison and see if you can do it in 81 seconds like he did. If you're in person, you do get a little bit more time. Also, because your body language is helping you communicate the story, you'll grab people's attention and keep it for longer. So really depends on your medium. Oh gosh, okay, now we have a lot of questions. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, I'm working the chat. Keep going, honey.
Okay. How do you, oh gosh, which one? Okay, how do you link your story model with the story of self, of us, and now? What strategy do you use? Here's my problem with us, the self, us, now. There's nothing wrong with that. But what ended up happening is that we make them not even vignettes, but we make them 5-second anecdotes just sort of tied together meaninglessly. At first, in 2008, when Howard Dean was doing it, before Barack Obama, it was a personal thing. The person talked about themselves and their journey. And that includes a challenge, a choice, and an outcome. And then in doing that, when we talk about our aspirations, that's where you can connect to the us. The I did this and it worked out for me or didn't work out for me. I did this and this is the outcome. And I see here now, as I do this, I see here that all of us want the same thing. I talked to this other person and here's this thing. And I talked to this other person, here's this thing. We connect the us with those aspirations. That's why we talked about aspirations a couple times. And the story of now is often in sort of abbreviated organizer talk, it's the action, but really that you're supposed to take, but really it's a sense of urgency. It's bringing people back to the challenge and ultimate choice you had to make. And to be able to say, and we are in that moment now. We all have to make that choice now. So instead of just saying, okay, well, and now it's a story of now, so now we're canvassing, that is not what the story of now is. The story of now is urgency brought on by the challenge and choice ahead of us. So I don't know if that's a long answer or like a stupidly abbreviated version because there's a lot to say about it, but I hope that helped a little bit. Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna, this one from Renee, because I just have to really get on it. What do you do in order to control how you tell stories? I'm a natural storyteller, but I get feedback that I go on too long. She's noted here that it's often from white professional loyalty types, from people who themselves go on entirely too long. This is a matter of perspective, right? Like you don't go on too long so long as you have, if you're engaging somebody's attention, but often straight white males, because they believe that the space is theirs by default, even if intellectually it's like, oh, we're all here. They've only ever owned this space and we're only ever a guest there. So you'll often, if you're getting that feedback, consider who you're getting that feedback from and consider what spaces you're entering into and see if you can maybe alter the space a little bit. See if you can maybe connect more deeply as to what aspirations you have in common with them. It was often what I have to do when I'm raising money from rich white people, connect on aspiration. And they'll let you talk longer or whatever, but this is a whole problem that we face all the time. That I can't.
I'm sorry, I thought you were through, Arshad.
I'm through.
I see a little problem with the, I didn't put the availability times in the Calendly app. So hang on to that link and I will go over there right after we sign off and put the times in. And then we're going to do pub quiz. Then we're going to do pundit cup right at 1:15.
Okay. Okay, good. I will say, while we have everyone here,
Sorry, guys.
oh, we gotta wrap. Pundit Cup is next. Totally different than the story thing. We are hosting the Pundit Cup, and that you can find the link. It starts at 1:15. It's the same platform that we use to use the hallway. So go to the schedule. You'll find Pundit Cup, and we're in the semifinal round. So come watch live as people compete.
Yeah.
To the
The
America.
winner gets tomorrow. The winner gets $500. So it's kind of a big deal.
It's a big deal. Come join us for Pundit Cup, please.
Here's our information. Any questions, anything you need, shoot us an email.
Thank you.
We might not get to it today, but we'll get to it for sure. Thank you guys so much.
I'm just so thrilled. I can't believe how many of you were here. Fantastic.
All right, Madam Host, kick us out of here.
Oh, do we have to show ourselves the door? Okay.
I don't know.
You get to show yourselves out. I don't end the session.
Okay. I'm so
I thought you kicked us out.
10:59.
Okay. All right. Well, show yourselves out, everybody, and grab a pack of matches on the way out. Whatever. I don't know.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm going to go fix the Calendly app myself.
Cool.
If I can figure out how to get out of here. This has been so much fun. All right. Here we go.